People sometimes make horrible mistakes in life, mistakes they can't correct or fix. Sometimes those involve matters of the heart, and when trust is broken, including when someone believes a lie and acts on it, that can ruin what was a brilliant relationship, turning something wonderful into a lost opportunity, never to be recovered. My name is Lyle, I'm 29. I have a story about myself and my girlfriend Liz. She's 28 and works as an assistant principal at a high school. I'm a shift supervisor at a downtown bank. We met when I was walking down to the street, and a field trip goer had poured a whole cup of ice water on me from a platform 20 feet up. A teacher or parent grabbed the kid, pulling him away. Then Liz ran over to me. "Sir, I am so sorry. On behalf of the high school, I apologize." She looked me over. My hair was plastered to my head, my suit jacket was soaked, and my socks were wet. "Any damaged electronics?" she asked. I pulled out my phone and it seemed to be working perfectly. I shook my head, but the bag of food I was carrying was soaked and sitting open on the sidewalk next to me. She noticed the bag. "Your lunch is ruined," I nodded. "Wait here." Then she walked back to the field trip, talking to some of the other adults. Kids were taking pictures of me standing soaked on the sidewalk. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures of them. That made them put their phones down. Some put them back in their pockets. A minute later, the woman came back. "Okay, the other teachers and parents are going to take the kids in to see the production of the show West Side Story. But to make up for the students' behavior and to make sure you don't go hungry, I'm going to take you to lunch on the school's dime." My eyes widened. My mouth dropped. I hadn't expected this. "Ma'am, that's not necessary. Knowing the perpetrator will face consequences and a receiving sincere apology would be enough." She looked at me. "I'm sure you would think so, but I'm the leader of this trip, and I'm also the assistant principal of the school. So as reparation for the embarrassment and the loss of your lunch, I'm inviting you to join me for lunch at—" She looked around, trying to pick out something worthy, but not outrageous. "J. Alexander's." I followed her eyes about a block down the street. Beyond the fast food places and the 7-Eleven, there was a J. Alexander's sign peeking out. I raised an eyebrow. "You know, this was just a club sandwich and a bag of chips," I mumbled, as I pointed to the soaked bag a few feet away. She stared at it for a minute, then at me. For a moment, there was a look in her eyes that wasn't just apology or fear. She brushed some residual water from my jacket and said softly, "I know, but you deserve an upgrade." She held her hand out. "I'm Liz." I took it. Her grip was oddly firm, but I didn't say anything. "I'm Lyle. Thank you for being so considerate." Her look moved to a charming smile. "You're welcome. So are you ready to go out for lunch?" "Sure, if you insist." "I do." We walked, making small talk until we got to the restaurant. When we arrived, the temperature had changed. The server, of course, rolled her eyes at my wet outfit. But I had gone from dripping to damp, and there wasn't much anyone could do. When we reached the table, Liz suggested I take off my jacket and hang it on my chair. I nodded, and a moment later I was in my shirt and tie, looking like I was getting ready to close out the night with a martini and cigar, rather than have an unexpected downtown power lunch. Liz looked at me. "No alcohol." I nodded. I decided to edge towards the cheaper end of the menu. I could see her looking over everything too, though she was glancing at me when I thought she wasn't looking. I eventually caught her directly, holding eye contact. She looked down. "I am thinking of getting a salad." "Yeah," I responded. "I'm thinking the cheeseburger." Then she looked up at me. "You're really thinking about this, aren't you?" There was a pause. "I was in a tough position. One of my students basically assaulted you, and I brought you to a place where you could order a ridiculous steak, but you're letting me off the hook." I nodded. "Generosity isn't measured in the number of dollars. You proved you wanted things to be right when you offered to take me here. You could have handed me a $20 bill. You could have offered an apology and a paper towel. And what could I have done? Pretty much nothing, but you took a risk. You offered to take me to lunch yourself, and I admire that immensely." The waitress came and took our orders. Nothing changed. When the waitress turned away, Liz looked back at me. "Admire? That's a bit of a loaded word." I shrugged. Interpret that as broadly or as narrowly as you like. If you want it to mean that I am very impressed with you and am thinking about asking you out for real, then that's great. If you want to take that to mean that I'm glad about how nice you were, I can live with that too. But don't make me guess. She was silent for a minute. I could see calculation in her eyes. I could see doubt and fear. I suppose I should tell you that I had a serious boyfriend before, and things went badly. She paused. If you run into my social circle, you might hear something of it. I don't mind if this turns into seeing you again. Just, just don't hold my past against me. I have been holding it against myself for 3 years. Her hand was holding her water glass. I reached out and touched it. Nothing big, nothing showy, just present, interested. I'm not going to blow things up because you botched a relationship up in the past. She drew in a breath, feeling the touch, and then hearing my words of understanding. Then she nodded, allowing a slight smile. Okay, Lyle. This will be a little apology lunch, but if you're going to ask me out after that, that would be nice. I nodded, smiled, brushed my hand across hers just once, and then pulled back. When the salad was done and the burger had disappeared, we smiled at each other. I'm sure that my students are in the middle of the show, she admitted. I'm sure everyone at my office is asking where I am. The check came, I reached for it, but she snatched it up before I could even touch it. Don't you dare even argue with me, Lyle. I proposed this lunch as a goodwill gesture on behalf of the high school. Then she paused. She looked at me and then touched my hand. We can talk about the next check. I smiled in return. I got her phone number. In the evening, I texted her. Thank you for lunch. My tie might not make it, but my suit is dry, and I only had to ask 15 questions when I got back to work. A few minutes later, I got a text back with a smiling emoji. You're welcome. Thank you making this easy. I hope you'll ask me out soon. I wouldn't need more encouragement. I just needed better timing. I thought Friday afternoon, once all the teenagers would be gone, would be the right time. Hey Liz, how about we meet at tomorrow evening at Bluefin Marina? We can have steaks on my dime and there's a yacht rock band. A few minutes later, I got a text back from her. Steak and no institutional questions? I'm so there. What time? 7 good? 7 sounds perfect. Can't wait, she responded. I arrived at the marina, which was really just a large steel building on a huge dock on the lake, at 6:55. I wanted to show that I was present, but not so nervous that I would sit around forever. 10 minutes later, a red crossover pulled up, and Liz popped out, waving at me. She closed the car door, shuffled as fast as her heels would allow, met me at the door, and kissed me on the cheek as I gave her a careful side hug. That simple kiss, indicative only of acceptance, felt more affectionate than anything I had felt in years. It had been casual, unconcerned, and totally present in the moment. We stepped through the rickety old glass door and were seated right along the edge of the water. For several minutes there was nothing but small talk. The sun had gone from a dull yellow to a pure orange and eventually settled in a deep red as it approached the trees on the far side of the lake. String lights turned on, too early to light the outdoor space, but a little too late to add cheer to the scenery. We had both ordered a glass of wine, and we sipped them sparingly. I hoped that each sip would add to the little smile, but also not that it loosened my tongue into something I didn't want to say too quickly. Tell me about your bank work. I told her about how we used to have 8 tellers, but now we only had 3. Banking in person was slowly fading away. Banking was less about tellers handing cash across the counter and more about loans, about investments, and about insurance. A customer would come in, concerned about her car failing, and we could offer her a loan to get a repair, or we could see about a car loan to replace it. When I had been a direct advisor, an old man had a car that was fading and couldn't afford a payment of more than $250 per month. So I called a dealership which had a fine used sedan that they were willing to offload at a reasonable price. I did the math, checked his credit, and determined that we could set him up with a payment of $225 per month. And I thought he was going to jump out of his chair and hug me. But he nodded, thanked me, and once per year I get a nice box of chestnuts. Every year there is a note, chestnut trees are rare, Enjoy these as a reward for getting me set up." That made her smile. She hated her work. She had hoped she would make a difference, but it seemed like the inmates completely ran the asylum at the school. Parents complained about disciplinary actions. Grades were subtly shifted up to get kids across the graduation stage. Money that should have gone to classrooms ended up being used to fix roofs, pay for maintenance, or sometimes even pay for breakfasts and lunches. It was discouraging, but she kept up. She had heard that private schools might be a little more conducive, and she was thinking of applying. I nodded. No harm in trying. Just before the sun fell behind the trees, a sailboat appeared from across the lake. It quietly pulled toward us, sometimes gently rising and falling over the water. Soon it passed 20 feet from us, with several kids standing along the side of the boat, waving and moored in one of the covered slips. Then once the sun disappeared, the sky remained golden and seemed to shine off of Liz's brown hair. She looked at me over her chicken primavera and asked if my eyes always sparkled like that. I shook my head. She smiled and took a bite. Good. That would be kind of freaky at a networking event. After we had eaten, we walked along the lake on a well-worn path. We talked about where we were in our lives and where we wanted to be. She wanted to be in a place where she could work with children, but without the chaos. I wanted a better management position with the bank. I had been taking leadership classes and was taking online seminars offered by the national corporation. I had hoped that within 6 months, I might be promoted to assistant general manager. I pointed at a rock. It jutted out over the lake. I told her I wanted to climb into and enjoy the view. She looked at me like I was crazy. But a moment later, I was standing on it. I walked from one end to the other, and it didn't even wobble. I held my hand out to her. She hesitated, then reached up and allowed me to pull her up. A moment later, we were both sitting on the edge of the lake, my legs dangling over the water, hers underneath her with her skirt pulled out around her. I looked over at her. She was beautiful. I'm not saying she was sexy, though she had appeal, and I don't mean that she was made up so heavily. It might as well have been a mask. I mean, she seemed to glow in the half-light of the evening. Her hair fell over her shoulders like cascades. Her dress, though modest, accented her figure as if it had been measured and sewn by hand. Even the way she held her legs under her seemed like the most feminine thing I had ever seen. It made me want to put my arms around her and never let her go. "May I ask a favor of a personal nature?" She looked at me surprised. "You can ask? May I take your picture?" I pulled out my phone. I've never felt so drawn to a woman in my life, and I want a picture to remember this moment. Her drew in a breath. "If I let you, we have to have a few selfies together I can share with my friends, and I think I should tell you more about my past." I nodded. "Okay then, go ahead and take your pictures." I snapped a half-dozen pictures, then I showed them to her, and for a moment I think she understood. She zoomed the screen in and out a few times, then looked at me. "You have an eye for this kind of thing." I shrugged. It was just the moment of you in the half-light. It felt like a treasure. She then pulled on my arm. "Come here." I moved and sat as close as I dared. She pulled out her phone and took probably 10 or 15 pictures from several angles. Her phone did an excellent job with the night shots. "Phones away," she said, and I slid mine back into my pocket. We were silent for a few minutes. Then she started. I was in a very happy relationship with Miles. Miles was kind, he had a lot of friends, and he wanted to integrate me into his life. He worked as an exterminator. He had a side hustle of fixing decks too. If he noticed that there was a loose piece or a step that was coming up, he'd leave his card, and it seemed like every evening there was 1 or 2 people calling him to make the repair. 30 minutes later, the board or piece would be repaired or replaced. He had a smile for his customers. On Saturdays, he played softball, and he always wanted me to be there watching, and for several months, I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. But then Sandra stepped in. She paused. After a minute in the darkness, she looked around. "Can we go somewhere with at least a little light?" I stood up, helped her off the broad rock, and we went back to the marina. We sat at the back of the bar, a beer in front of us, but neither of us really drinking them. Then she continued. "Sandra had been a friend from college. We went for She smiled at me. All right, Liz, I understand, but I could partly tell she didn't understand and she wasn't happy about it. Something in me said that this wasn't over. She sighed. I went to the game that Saturday, but that was the last one I ever attended. She was silent again. Then he looked at me. 3 days later, I got a call from Sandra. I hate to have to tell you this, but I've been holding on to this. I think Miles is seeing other women. I was horrified. I had known Sandra for years, and for whatever faults she had, I had never known her to lie to me. Over the last several Tuesdays and Thursday, he's been seeing a woman at the diner across from my apartment. He shows up, then she does. Then after they eat, they leave together. I didn't want to assume the worst, but I followed them yesterday, and they went right into a hotel over on East Street, just a few blocks down. I was horrified. Cheating on me. I hung up the phone, told him that I heard about what he did, how he had been going behind my back, and that I didn't want to see him anymore. Of course, that left plenty of time for me to commiserate with Sandra. She told me how he didn't even stop seeing the other woman, and for 3 months, she was my constant companion. Then one morning, I was driving over to her apartment, and when I parked, I looked across the street. There was no diner. It was a salon and a plant store. I tried to brush it off, but I looked down both directions, and the only restaurant was a Japanese place on the same side of the street. Something in me told me to start walking west down the road towards East Street. When I got there, I didn't see a hotel. I walked a half-mile down one end and then back up the other. There were no hotels. Now I was getting suspicious. I walked back to her apartment. Her smile seemed pasted on. It didn't look any different, but now it felt sinister. I was looking for that diner across the street. I said casually. She looked at me strangely. There's no diner in this neighborhood at all, Liz. I asked another question. I walked down to East Street looking for that hotel you told me about. She gave me a blank stare. There's no hotel over on. Then she paused and scowled at me. I knew she had been lying to me the whole time. I stood up. You monster. You never saw Miles at all. There was no other woman. He was never cheating on me. She just took a sip of her tea. He doesn't deserve you, you know. He's holding you back. I just wanted to make you see that you didn't need him. I slapped the cup from her lips. It fell to the floor and crashed. Don't ever call me or speak to me again. I went home, crying for a couple of hours. I had spurned Miles at the word of a friend who wanted nothing but to control me. That night, when I thought he would be there, I went to his house, rang the doorbell, but he only spoke with me through the speaker. I tried to tell him that I realized that I was lied to, but he was angry. He had never cheated, and I had turned our love into something horrible. I pleaded with him to just let me come in and talk to him. Then another voice came through the speaker, a woman's voice. You had your chance, and you lost him. He's mine now. Liz put her hand over her eyes. She was crying. You're the first person other than my family that I've told, and it's still hard. I pulled out a napkin and handed it to her. He had gotten over me, the betrayal that I was guilty of, not him, and found another woman who appreciated him. She crumpled up the napkin in her hands. I've never felt so stupid in all my life. Then she looked down at the table. That's the kind of woman that's sitting across from you, Lyle. I waited for her to regain her composure, and then when she looked up at me, I placed my hand on hers. I'm not here to prosecute your past. You've already condemned yourself every night of your life, and I have no need to do that anymore. If there is an issue, or if you suspect something, I ask that you talk to me. Don't run away. Don't let fear or pain cloud your judgment. She sat looking at my hand for a long time. Okay, Lyle, if something feels off, I'll talk. I nodded, smiling. Good. I'm sorry that you lost something so valuable, but maybe that means I can have a chance. She smiled at that, and we slowly drank our beers. When they were empty, I paid the final tab and walked her to her car. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being so kind. I know I dumped a lot on you, but you've made me feel better for the first time in a long time. She looked at her phone. Those selfies we made look great. She paused. May I see the pictures you took of me again? I pulled out my phone, pulled up one of the pictures, and showed it to her. She held the phone in her hand and smiled. I'm glad this is how you get to see me first, or almost. She looked up at me. Can you send me this? If you send me the selfie photos, I said. I want evidence that I was with you. She smiled a little broader at that. Okay, Lyle, I'll send them tonight. Me too, I said. She put her arms around me and gave me a big hug. I put a peck on her cheek, and then she got in her car and drove off. For 6 years. Was pretty communicative and we made up quickly. I had hoped to take them both out that evening at a restaurant near her apartment, but I took Ame alone. The next morning I was at work, and Liz appeared. She wanted to talk. She looked angry. I found a conference room in the back, and even though she kept her voice low, she was seething with anger. I know you've been cheating on me. She spoke in a low, barely controlled tone. Cheating on you? I asked, stunned. What are you talking about? I've been following you. I've seen you with the same girl several days in a row. I want you to admit to it right now, or I'll ruin your reputation in front of everyone. Now I was baffled. Liz, I don't know what you're talking about. I've barely talked to any women for weeks. Don't lie, Lyle. I saw her with you myself. She showed me pictures of the last couple days. Pictures of me spending time with Amy. Liz, I sent you a text on Sunday explaining that my sister was coming into town. Text? I don't remember any text. You didn't? She began flipping through her text messages. Oh no. I got on my own phone and got on a FaceTime call with Amy. Hey sis, I have Liz here. Would you just say hi to her and tell her who you are? I pointed the phone at Liz. Hey Liz, I'm Amy. I came into town to visit Lyle because I haven't seen my brother for a couple of weeks. He spent a lot of time talking about you, and I've been looking forward to meeting you. I turned the phone back to my face. I turned the phone back to my face. Okay, Amy, thanks. Talk to you later? I then hung up. Liz sat at the table, face in her hands. What did I just do? I sat down at the table near her, not next to her, but close enough for my presence to be felt. After several minutes of crying, she raised her face. You must hate me. I sat quietly for a while. You did hurt me, and you violated the one request I asked of you. Talk to me. Don't jump to conclusions. Her eyes widened in horror. I've been talking you up for weeks to Amy, and I think you owe her an apology. If you come over this evening, apologize to her for thinking such things of her. We can talk about where we are when she's gone. The horror descended into what seemed like despair. I can't believe I was able to talk myself into that. I saw you with her, and I must have missed the email. If I had just gone into the coffee shop like we had planned, it all would have made sense. She was quiet for a very long time. Okay, Lyle, I'll go apologize to her. She stood up, and I'm sorry to you too. I broke my promise, I invaded your work, drew wrong conclusions about you, and I made what we had into something horrible. I'm so sorry. She turned to the good. Can you at least hug me? I stood up and gently put my arms around her. Then she let go and practically ran out of the conference room and out of the bank. When I got home that evening, I found Amy sitting in my living room. She smiled at me, but asked what that call was about. I explained everything to her, and her smile slipped into a kind of grimace. Wait, she saw us at the coffee shop the other day and just assumed that you were going behind her back? I nodded. And that call was just to prove that we're siblings. Yeah, pretty much. I texted her on Sunday, but it must have gotten lost in the shuffle, and she assumed the worst. Amy shook her head. Sounds like she needs to grow up. I nodded. Yeah, that sounds about right. I paused. I asked her to come over. Amy eyed me. Why? I told her that she has to come by and apologize to you for thinking of you that way. She paused, thinking. Do you think she'll come? She said she would. Amy's face was skeptical. The evening passed, and it wasn't until almost 9 o'clock that Liz showed up. She was holding a bottle of wine in one hand and a bouquet of white roses in the other, and she gave both to Amy. Then she sat down on a chair, letting out a long, ragged breath. I've been sitting in my apartment ever since I left the bank. I've been trying to figure out how to face the two of you. I'm shocked, embarrassed, mortified, and humiliated. She looked at me. He knows that this isn't the first time I've done this. She shook her head. At least last time I was lied to by someone I thought was my friend. But this time, I am the only one to blame. I let myself think those things of the both of you, and I don't know how I'll be able to live with myself, especially if Lyle rightly chooses to end things with me. She walked over to my sink, drew a glass of water, drank it, and then came back. Amy, I am truly sorry and regretful for saying and thinking the things I did of you. If I had seen the text, or if I had had the good sense to just come into that coffee shop and talk to you, I would have seen the family resemblance. But I listened to all my worst fears and let it go out of control. I hope you'll forgive me. Then Amy did something that surprised me. She stood up and walked over to Liz. You know, Liz, I think it would be very helpful we went out together. Just you and me. She turned to look at me. You can hold down the fort tonight, right, bro? I nodded, caught off guard at this turn of events. Within minutes, they were out the door. But a moment later, Liz came back in. She folded herself into my arms. I'm sorry, I love you. And then a minute later, she went out to follow Amy. I didn't see either of them for the rest of the night. I went to bed, and then I vaguely heard the door open and then close at around 2 a.m., but didn't follow up. It wasn't until the next morning that I began to learn. Amy was up making coffee. She was always a natural early riser. She smiled at me. She's a sweet girl. I can tell why you like her so much. What did you talk about? I asked. Girl talk, she responded. I asked what she really thought about you, and she was effusive. That seems like the right word. I explained that you're a gentle individual, that you would rather cut your arm off than to cheat, and that you see her as your ideal beauty. I warned her that she can't ever do anything like that again, that I have sister authority to smooth things over, but just once. Sister authority, I remarked, skeptically. Of course, I get to determine if she deserves a chance to get you back. I know you're still in love with her. So when she comes around tonight, sister authority says you take her back, and we all forget that this ever happened. That evening, Liz showed up at 6. I was in the kitchen. Amy was sitting on the couch. When the knock came, Amy opened the door, and then I heard them whispering to each other. Then a moment later, Liz stepped into the kitchen. Amy says she's absolving me, but it's just once. I nodded. Then I opened my arms to her. She almost knocked me over as she ran into my arms. I'm sorry, Lyle. I should have known better. You love me so much. I should have known that it was all so stupid. Then she pulled back, reached up with her face and kissed me. Tell me you still love me, Lyle. I do love you, but this needs to be the last time. It will be, I promise, Liz whispered. I kissed her back and then said, all right, don't let me down.